Well, hey guys, today we're going to dive in and take a look at Standard 5.4, which deals with the First World War. We've already seen how American imperialism has caused us to bump up against some other countries like Spain and China, and we've had some conflicts. And now we're going to see what happens when this happens on a global scale, World War One. So, first of all, we're going to talk about some of the causes of World War One. Often, we talk about four main causes: militarism, which we'll talk about in the next slide, alliances between countries, sometimes in secret. So if we pick a fight with this country, actually this country is going to jump in too. We just don't know it until it happens, which is a problem. Imperialism, when we're building up empires, which is what we've talked about all through this unit. And then nationalism. I'm going to talk about this one first because this is the one that throws people sometimes. Sometimes you hear nationalism and you hear it as a synonym for patriotism. It can be used that way, but sometimes, like in this case, we use it in a little bit different way. Nationalism can mean that I love my country, I have excessive pride toward it, which so far, that's fine. You can be proud of your country, you should be, but sometimes to the detriment of other nations. You say, what do you mean? Well, let me give you an example that's very personal. Should you, or is it okay for you to have a high opinion of yourself? Yeah, that's fine. Should you go around telling other people, you're a dummy, you stink, you're bad at everything that I'm good at, why do you even bother existing? That's what's going on sometimes with nationalism, okay? Now, to further complicate it, a nation isn't necessarily a synonym for a country. In the United States, we typically have one large group of people. We talk about the melting pot sometimes, where we come in here and we shed all these things so that we can be one group of people. But even within the United States, we talk sometimes about the Cherokee Nation. They're a group of people who are distinct. They have a common culture that's separate and unique from everybody else in the country. And the problem in World War I is that sometimes you have these countries in Europe. Here's a country, for example, and maybe you've got 7 or 8 different cultures, different nations within there. Now, you add on top of that the fact that they're very, very, very proud of their national identity and they want to be independent. That's a problem. They want a country, but they don't have one. And on top of that, now we have all these new weapons. We have tanks, we have machine guns, we have blimps, we have airplanes, we have different kinds of gas like mustard gas. And as people or nations start to accumulate these different weapons, they're like, hey, maybe I can use this to further my goal of being an independent nation. So we're starting to see a little bit of. Now, enter into this environment the assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary in 1914. So the deal is this. Archduke, which is basically a name for a prince, okay? Think about just, I don't know, like a prince, okay? From Austria-Hungary. He's visiting Bosnia, which Austria-Hungary's just taken over. Now, the problem is Bosnia has this group of people in it called the Serbs. They're a nation who want to be independent. They don't want to be part of Bosnia, much less and they'll be part of the larger empire of Austria-Hungary. And so to express their frustration, this guy up here in the right, his name is Gavrilo Princip. He's a member of an organization called the Black Hand. That's what that is. He sticks out a gun and he shoots the Archduke of Austria-Hungary and his wife. Now, most other times that would just be a real problem. You go and you would arrest that guy and, everything's taken care of. But this starts to bubble up with some of these other issues where the Serbs want independence and the Bosnians don't really want to be under the control of Austria-Hungary. And so because of this, things start to happen and rumblings start to occur and all these complex military alliances start to kick into high gear. And as one country declares war on another, it actually is Russia that declares war on Austria-Hungary through a crazy series of events, which I'll be gracious enough not to make you memorize. All of Europe starts to declare war on itself when World War I is in effect beginning. Now, here's the question. Is this going to impact us? Like, this is American history. This isn't European history. So should we get involved in it? And if so, when? So the question is, why in the world do we get involved in World War I? Well, we start out with Woodrow Wilson in 1914 when the war is going on, and he's like, no, we are going to be neutral. We are not going to get involved in this, and of course it doesn't actually last. It will last, as you can see up top, until 1917, which is almost the end of the war. The war ends in 1918, okay? So how do we stay out and what actually happens? Well, first of all, America's traded with Germany prior to this for years and years and years, but Britain has blockaded all these German ports because Britain is at war with Germany in the middle of all this. And so we're like, well, I guess we're not going to trade with them. We're not going to try to pick a fight with England so that we can get our boats into the German ports. So let's just back off. Now that's a little bit of a problem because remember, we've had all this immigration going on and we have lots and lots of immigrants who have come into North America, or the United States in particular, in the last couple of years. And that's going to start to make people decide, am I American? Am I German American? Am I German? And most people are going to say, I'm just an American. I don't want to be, I love this country. I don't want to be causing problems. American businessmen look at the issues and they tend to side with England in part because of the trade that's continuing. And so in order to keep that trade afloat, a lot of American businesses give loans to the allies in Europe, including the British. The public supports Britain. We've been allies with them for a long time. And, they speak English, which don't discount how much Americans like speaking English. It's kind of a big deal. Now, this continues where we're sort of just staying on the fringes until the first real crisis, which is the Lusitania. Okay. 1915, the Lusitania is sunk. The Lusitania is a transport ship, takes people from New York to the United Kingdom. And as it's near the Irish coast, it's sunk by a German U-boat. Now, U-boat stands for underwater, actually. It's just a fancy name for a submarine. And Germany says, look, we are pretty sure that the Lusitania is carrying weapons that are bound for the United Kingdom and for the folks who are fighting against, and we can't have that, especially from a supposed neutral country. America denies it. No, that's not it. You actually killed lots of Americans. And there are a number of Americans who are killed. 128 that are on board die. And so Americans are really upset. We're supposed to be neutral. Now we've been accused of sending over weapons, which we didn't do. Footnote, actually, there were weapons on there that were being shipped over to the British. So the Germans weren't wrong, but a bunch of innocent civilians died, and that really upsets us. Now, American people start to protest this thing and say, you can't do that to America. Germany does not want us involved. Okay, already by 1915, this war has been fought largely to a standstill in Europe, where both sides are kind of locked in combat. They can't make forward progress, and so they're just gonna be stuck there for long periods of time. Now, here's the thing: if all of a sudden America shows up and helps the British and the French, that's going to pretty much shift the tide of the war. And so Germany's like, fine. We will stop using our submarines to sink stuff coming from America. We will not do this anymore. Okay? We're not going to go to war, and everybody breathes a huge sigh of relief. Wilson actually runs for president saying, vote for me. Wilson, he kept us out of war. And he wins a second term. Everybody's like, man, that's great. This guy is doing his job really well. Now, the problem is that Germany doesn't actually believe we're going to stay out of the war. They think eventually our economic interests are going to get the better of us and we're going to get involved. And so Germany says, who can we use to keep America out of the war? Ooh, I know. They have a neighbor that doesn't really like them. And that neighbor is Mexico. You say, why would Mexico like us? At this point, it was only about 60 years ago that we took the American Southwest from them in the Mexican-American War. Actually, it's a little longer than that, but close. People are still alive who remember it. And so Germany says, look, if you will attack the United States, Mexico, we will, after the war is over, help you get your land back from the United States. Now, again, this message is intercepted, and this does not go over well with the American people. See, I like this cartoon because it shows Mexicans being tempted in the desert by the Germans, but boy, doesn't that German look a lot like the devil, right? The idea is the Germans are like Satan tempting Jesus in the desert is the picture that this is connoting, okay? So in 1917, Germany realizes we are super upset about the Lusitania. We're extremely upset about the Zimmermann Note, and they're also not doing really well in the war. And so they say, fine, we got to do whatever we can do. We're going to go back to sinking boats coming from America because we know you guys are actually supplying the people fighting against us. And now that we know they're going back on their promise to stop sinking boats, Wilson goes to Congress and he says, I know we've tried to be neutral in this, but we have to make the world safe for democracy. So we've got to declare. Okay. So why doesn't it actually happen? Why is it that Wilson can't make the world safe for democracy? Because there's a lot of the world in the 20th century that is not democratic. Well, let's talk about a couple things here. First of all, on America's home front, there's a huge use of propaganda to get everybody behind this push. Okay, you see posters like the one over here, beat back the Hun, ancestors of the Germans who are considered to be brutal, and you see his hands and his bayonet are bloody. You got to beat him back with Liberty Bonds. Americans, plant victory gardens. We may have a food shortage because so much food is going to be sent over to our allies. So plant gardens. That'll make it much easier for the government to know where resources can be allocated. Enlist in the military if you're young enough and can go fight. Buy war bonds if you can't go fight, so we can provide for our military. Now, remember, again, we've got lots of immigrants in the United States who are Germans, and these people are being called Huns all the time by propaganda. Okay? That's not great. If you're a German American, you don't want to be called a Hun. Okay? It gets so bad that German is taught in a lot of schools, and we quit teaching German because that's the enemy language. We stop playing music from Germans, whether it be polka or Wagner or whatever, and we start renaming German foods, right? Instead of sauerkraut, it's like Liberty cabbage. This is crazy stuff. We pass a new act, a new sedition act in the United States that makes it illegal to speak out against the war effort by encouraging people, for example, not to go if they get drafted. There's a guy in particular in I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. I want to say Schenck. I'm not sure that's right. Who's arrested for encouraging people. He says, if you get drafted, don't go. He gets arrested, charged with violating the Sedition Act, and he's sent to jail. And all he does is speak out against it. People say, what about freedom of speech? I don't know. Now, remember, the other Sedition Act was way back when the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, or the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans are going at it. The French were hanging out with the Democratic Republicans and all that stuff. But again, this Sedition Act is just like that one, really bringing the freedom of speech into question. Now, so how does the war go? Well, fortunately for the U.S. history standards, you don't have to know a whole lot about it. What you need to know is that we show up in 1917 and we help defeat the Germans pretty quickly. It's almost exactly like I told you. There's been a stalemate in Europe for years now. We show up with fresh troops, new supplies, and it's just kind of bulldoze. There's one last German push into France that fails, and on November 11th, 1918, an armistice is signed that's a ceasefire. Now, because Wilson has been very involved in the end of the war, he's asked to take part in the peace negotiations at the Treaty of Versailles in France. Wilson shows up, and he's got this great plan in his mind called the 14 Points. And the 14 Points, in his mind, is going to make it so wars don't happen again. It looks at all the things that led to the beginning of this war and says, let's take those things off the table. So Germany was attacking boats. Let's declare freedom of the seas. We don't attack people on the sea, especially unless unless there are military things in your war or somebody else. Let's end secret treaties. So I know that Italy has an alliance with this country and this country and this country. So if I attack Italy, I'm actually inviting a dog pile on me. Okay, that would be great. An arms reduction. Let's make it so the countries around the world can't just build up navies and armies and weapon stockpiles that are massive. Let's have self-determination of peoples. In other words, let's let people decide what country they're a part of. And if they don't want to be a part of your country, we don't do it. And let's have some kind of international peace organization. Now, he's going to call his the League of Nations. We'll get to that in a minute. The Allies, not Germany, not the guys who lost, but the Allies show up at Versailles to draw up this peace treaty. But the Allies, the guys who won, other than Wilson, have their own interest. And their interests are, we got the poop bombed out of us in World War I. We want somebody to pay for it. We want somebody to give us money for all this damage that's been done to our countries. I mean, you don't have farmland anymore. They have craters. What's going to happen? We're super close to the end of these notes, but I am going to run out of time on this video. So look for a part 2 very shortly. It should be linked down in the description, and it should also be on my notes page and on my YouTube page. I'll see you in just a minute.